Good morning, kiddos. I am here and so excited to kind of teach you guys a little bit more about plants and all their different needs. So if you have a neighbor, go ahead and turn and talk to them and tell them what are the different things that plants need in order to survive. All right, so if you remember from my video on Thursday, plants need several different things in order to survive. The first one is all plants need water, right? The another thing, they all need light. Then the third thing is they all need soil, and then the fourth thing is they all need different nutrients and different kinds of fertilizer, okay? And so all plants need those things, but what's really cool about plants is that all of them need different amounts, different kinds of those things, and all plants tend to get them in different ways, okay? So today we're going to talk about, I'm going to show you some exciting plants that get their nutrients and stuff like that in different ways, okay? So let me go get one of my plants and trade off Remy for a plant, and we will get started with that. All right, so this plant here is an orchid, okay? So I know it's a little hard to see. It has a really long stem that has some pretty flowers. The flowers are getting a little bit old. They're about to die. That's why they look wilty like that. Flowers don't live forever. And so an orchid is really interesting in how it gets its needs, because an orchid is what's called an epiphytic plant. And so that means that instead of growing in the ground like most plants that we see, orchids actually use their roots to grow around trees or other like rocks or other objects like that in the wild, okay? Which is, I think, is really cool. And so that's why I had to plant my orchid in a clear pot, okay? And if you'll notice, this is not soil that's in here. It's actually something called sphagnum moss, and so it's similar enough to what a tree branch would be like, because I can't grow a whole entire tree in my house. And so that keeps the orchid happy. But if you'll look at the orchid's roots, they're already searching out, see, and growing outside the pot, and the orchid's roots are green. The orchid's roots are green so that the orchid can use its roots to photosynthesize different kinds of energy or light energy, because normally an orchid's roots would be above the soil and would be exposed to air. So that is something that's really interesting about orchids, and one way that they get their different needs met is that they have big roots that are thick and can grab onto trees and stuff like that. And so that's how they meet their soil needs, is that they can be actually entirely soil-less plants. And so that is a really cool thing about them. All right, so that's orchids. All right, so this next plant that we're going to look at is called an African violet. And so I love African violets. These are my favorite plants. I actually have, I think I have 30 of them, and so you could definitely say Miss Neely likes African violets. So what I like about African violets is that they're pretty much your normal plant, right? And so if you look in here, I'll try and show the camera. There's just normal soil in there. As you can see, the container to grow it in is not clear like the orchid was, because the roots normally grow underground, so we want them to grow underground. And then it has really nice little leaves, and I've even got some little flower buds here that make it a very cool plant. But something that is really interesting about African violets is that if you cut off one of these leaves and just put it in water, that leaf will start to grow roots even without any soil. And so you can make lots of new plants that way. And I just think that is so interesting and so fun. And I do that a lot of the time. I don't have any leaf cuttings going right now because winter is not a good time to start them. And so I just haven't really started any yet. There hasn't been enough light out. But that is something really cool about African violets and about how they meet their needs. Now, African violets need a good amount of sun, otherwise they won't grow. That's why I just told you that I hadn't started any of those leaf cuttings yet. Okay, so let's look at one more kind of cool plant. All right, so this plant is called a sundew, and if you will look on it very closely, especially this leaf right here, you can see that there are little tiny black dead bugs on the leaves. And the reason for that is that this plant is a carnivorous plant. And so when this plant needs food, the way that it gets its food is by catching these little bugs, and the leaf will actually wrap up and it'll digest it. And so it's a plant that can actually eat animals. Yeah. You might have heard Venus flytraps do something kind of similar. I don't have any Venus flytraps, but I wanted to get them. And there are other kinds of plants that do too. I have sundews because I just think they're so pretty. And so this kind of plant can definitely, that's how it gets its nutrients, which is a cool different way. Not all plants do that. And so that's something that's really interesting about this plant. And makes it different in how it gets its needs. So, we learned about 3 different kinds of plants today. There are so many more plants than that, guys, and they all get their needs in different ways. Cactus in the desert, they store a lot of water inside them so that they can make it through how dry the desert is. There are all different kinds of things that plants do in order to survive. And so I would like you to take a second to go ahead and turn and talk to your neighbor and tell them what is a plant that you know of and what are its needs. How does it survive? I bet you guys came up with some really, really awesome things, and so that is very, very exciting. So next time we will be talking about how we start seeds and how we can grow plants from new seeds. I got several little seed kits, and so that'll be really exciting to get to grow those with you. If you are at home, maybe see if you can ask your mom or dad if they have any seeds and some little pots lying around that you could use. Or when you go to the grocery store, maybe you could grab some. Doesn't have to be very expensive. That would be a really cool project for you to follow along and do with me, as we're going to do next time. Thank you guys for watching, and stay safe.